Hello, everybody. I'm Eshan Pokhrel,
My name is Cameron Cummings.
and today we are here with the 33rd edition of the Pew Political Podcast. Today we're talking about the something that hasn't been in the news much, which is a little disappointing because it's a huge topic and has been frankly kind of ignored by the media. So we're gonna just get right into it. Today we're talking about a Norfolk Southern freight train that had 150 cars, and it derailed near East Palestine, Ohio, which is like a border town kind of between Ohio and Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, I believe. Yes, and so 20 of these cars that derailed, and 20 of the cars were labeled as carrying hazardous materials, and in order to claiming that if they don't really open the cars up, there's going to be an explosion that might be even worse. They opened the cars up and released the chemicals. So there's hazardous materials have been going through the air. There's photos of huge smoke clouds, like black plumes of smoke just erupting from the area, the crash site. It's a very bad situation. And now, thankfully, so far there hasn't been detections of pollution in the city of East Palestine. However, the Ohio River, which is one of the biggest rivers in the country and has huge tributaries, including the Tennessee River, which we are familiar with, has started testing positive for some pollutants. So, not a good situation. Yeah, Cameron, what do you have to say about this?
I did not know much about it until Eshan informed me. So Eshan is also not only a contractor, a big provider of PB political news. He's also a large provider of my news, as he will text me updates on pretty much everything, including this. Like I said, it's not really in the news. It just hit Twitter and a bunch of social media platforms and a few smaller news segments recently.
Yeah.
Recently, this morning and last night.
Yeah.
So as of much, nothing has been said. But I know one thing. As of today, Norfolk Southern has announced a $1 million reimbursements to over 700 families affected by the pollutants. I don't know if Eshan's already covered this, so I'm just going to hit these facts.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Trains have already returned to using the tracks in the area for freight shipments. Fish, chickens, and other wildlife are reported to be dying due to the release of the chemicals from the train crash. And low levels of toxins are being reported in the Ohio River downstream of the site of the derailment. And obviously, a little tidbit about the Ohio River, about how large it is. The Ohio River flows through 6 states and has a massive tributary in the Tennessee River. So millions of Americans could be affected by the derailment, and not just people in the Ohio area that have been immediately affected.
Yeah, also down south around Alabama, Tennessee, wherever. I don't know where the Tennessee River flows through. All the states, it's really taking a big block of the United States, the mid-south. Oh, my timer. The mid-south district of the United States really getting affected. So, like you were saying, there's not a lot of media coverage, and this is actually this happened on February 3rd. So it's been it's been 11 days at the time of recording.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, there was an initial bout of mainstream media. They just it was a train derailed, and they kind of just it happened, and they kind of moved on, which I guess happens in a news cycle. However, it's back because the chemicals that they're releasing. I'm not going to get into all the chemicals because I can't pronounce these things. I'm not a big science guy, if you couldn't tell, but a lot of these chemicals have one of them is a known carcinogen in humans. I should have probably found the name, but there's a lot of different toxic chemicals that have just been released to the air. And East Palestine's not a big city, or it's a town, but initially Norfolk Southern, the company that owns the freight car, was gonna pay $25,000 in damages, and that's about $5 per citizen. So that's what a 5,000 person town, I think. Yeah, but now it's $1 million. There's over 700 families that have been affected by this, like you were saying. And I think, honestly, this has to, and we're going to focus mainly on the governmental aspect of this, because this honestly just seems like a failure of government and regulation from the transportation department, from Ohio's transportation department, and just rails and unions from across the whole political spectrum. Really, it's just a failure, I'd say. And it's just really disappointing that, and we won't know the health effects on the people that were affected until much later because of the nature of these chemicals. It's just a really bad situation.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go into like East Palestine's response.
Yeah, go ahead.
Many citizens, obviously, in the 700-person town, I want to say, correct?
Yeah, no, 700 families. It's like 5,000. I'll look up the
families,
actual.
Sorry, the 700 families. So many of the citizens in the town of those 700 families have reported and complained about several health issues since the derailment, including the burning sensation in their eyes, headaches, among with other issues, such as like I know, mainly just with like smelling nose and with
like
their eyes as well,
dry
like,
throats too, stuff like that.
And Mayor Trent Conaway has been critical of Norfolk Southern's lack of response to the situation, and just I think everyone already knows Norfolk Southern is the owner of the train. I guess the company that owns the trains of the one that derailed in Ohio.
Yeah.
And the EPA officials continue to test air quality in the area to see what's going on.
Yeah, Norfolk Southern is one of the biggest railways in like the it's a class 1, which I guess means it operates the most. I'm not really sure about the rail system or the freight rail system in the United States. But yeah, it has 19,000 miles in routes and in 22 states, so it almost covers half the United States. And also has routes in Canada. So there's a lot. Norfolk Southern is basically one of the premier rail companies in the eastern United States. And yeah, this is like a complete failure. Like you're saying, Mayor Conaway, he was very vocal. All of our sources for this have been like local news because all the updates have been coming from local news, a little bit from NPR. Shout out to them for, covering this. But the media has really largely ignored this. And Mayor Conaway has been like very aware of this. He's saying he doesn't really want to be steamrolled by like the whims of news cycles. You know how news cycles just kind of move on after a day or two of coverage to focus on something else. He said he wants to make sure everyone's accountable. And I guess Norfolk Southern has increased their reimbursement matter. So like, I guess like you were saying, Twitter has really picked this up over the last couple of days. Like I texted you on Sunday about this podcast. We should do something on this. And about yesterday and today and Sunday night, Twitter started like making that got around. Like I started reaching my Twitter feed, and I've seen it more and more. So it's good that it's getting more exposure to the mainstream or to the larger audience, I guess. Let's go nationally here a little bit. So like freight trains use braking systems from the Civil War era still. This is something I didn't know until I did the research for this. President Obama, when he was in office, put a rail safety measure in that would require trains to have, they call them electronically controlled pneumatic braking systems, so ECP braking. So I guess just, electronic braking. And this got put into effect. However, lobbyists or regulators sided with lobbyists rather than the board of, say, the Safety Board for Transportation, the NTSB. And they just kind of ignored the order to put electronic braking in. And again, these braking systems they use currently have been around since the Civil War, and they've not been updated since then. So, even though rail is such a critical part of our infrastructure, it's very outdated and its technology. It definitely needs an update because rail is a great way to send things across the country and get places. But when you don't have the proper infrastructure for it, it gets a little dicey. Yeah, and Norfolk Southern was part of that lobbying group that eventually they pushed the Trump administration to reverse the electronic braking measure. And yeah, I don't know. It just seems like a really big mess of the rail company's own doings here.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot. I mean, I didn't really care about trains since I was 8, watching Thomas the Train. So I didn't know a lot about this, the Civil War braking system, since the era that they had the braking system. Or anything of the fact. I didn't know much of anything of it. And also, Eshan, he's a business guy. He's one of those. I'm big into computers, so trains are probably as far away from what we look at on a daily basis as it possibly can be. So knowing about what Norfolk Southern's been lobbying for and all the things that they've been slowly acquiring and, I guess, getting when it comes down to, rights and privileges of what they have, it's something that I don't think even a lot of people know. The majority of Americans even know about, or even if you showed them Norfolk Southern's logo or what they were or their name itself, it wouldn't ring a bell for anybody. Or I shouldn't say that. A fair amount of American citizens.
Most. You could say most, honestly.
Most.
Yeah.
We'll say most.
I think these like transportation companies are so like they work in the background, which is fine, but like I think there's also like a kind of like a societal contract that you have to actually do things correctly and make sure your job is to be. You can work in the shadows. You can be like because I'm sure Norfolk Southern has like and all the rail companies they make millions of dollars, billions of dollars in revenue, and that's fine. Yes. That's fine if we don't know about it, but like you have to still look out for the common good in the sense that you're being entrusted. You're being given the privilege to do this alone without having any real scrutiny from the public. And obviously, when it backfires like it does here, then you get all the scrutiny, and it's because you messed up. And that's unfortunate for the citizens of East Palestine and the areas around in Ohio and Pennsylvania. But it's also unfortunate for a lot of other states because the water, if the Ohio River gets contaminated, that's a big source of water for millions of other Americans, and they're as far away as you could be from the actual derailment. And yeah, it's not a good look at all for Norfolk Southern as a company, or for a lot of these rail companies, and for obviously lobbyists who successfully lobbied the Trump administration to reverse the policy. That being said,
I know a big thing
go ahead.
Sorry, I know a big thing that people were upset about was the initial amount of money they planned to pay out to the citizens of East Palestine.
Yeah.
700 families that have been that have fallen victim to this tragedy. Or I don't even say tragedy, I just say mistake, really. It was a tragedy for them, but a mistake on the part of Norfolk Southern.
Yeah.
And it was such a, honestly, like, I guess I would say, like, not even shockingly, but disrespectfully low amount of money to walk from the jump. Which I saw most people were the main complaint, and now they've upped it up to $1 million. And as the story grows and grows, and more people find out about it, and the number I would assume would probably go even higher than that.
Yeah.
And if the chemicals do cause even more effect to the land, the food, especially the Ohio River, I think that's if it really gets into the river, that's when all the blame is coming to them, and more heat, especially from the government, is going to come to them as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about the government.
That's when I feel like they get the most press coverage. But as we see what happens, as you said, this derailment only happened 11 days from us recording this podcast. We're going to see what really happens.
Yeah. Let's talk about the government, like you were saying, because the government, or the federal government at least, even the state government, they've kind of been silent. So Secretary of Transportation is currently Pete Buttigieg. He was the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He ran for president. Did surprisingly well, and he got a cabinet seat out of it. But let it be known that Secretary Buttigieg turned down the Department of the OMB, like the Office of, I think it's Management and Budget. He turned that down for transportation because he wanted to be more Office of Management and Budget. Yeah, he wanted to be more in the news. This is like an actual like thing. Which just shows he's really just doing this for like a career, like a ladder climbing position. And Secretary Buttigieg just had, in like the last 2 months, the Southwest Airlines fiasco. You know how all the airlines are getting canceled around Christmas and around the New Year. He had other airline issues with like airlines not keeping staff on retainer after COVID, which I guess was a federal, like they gave him the money to do that and it wasn't enforced. And then now he has this, and he finally made a statement yesterday on Twitter. He obviously was like, we're saddened to hear all this, and he said that he'd tried to hold everybody responsible and all that stuff, but there was no concrete plan to do so. I think an easy thing he could do is just like push to just get back the ECP braking systems, electronic braking, modernize. Not even that. It doesn't even need to be like electronic. It just needs to be modern, more modern than the Civil War, which was over 150 years ago now. Almost 160 years ago now. So I think this is a weak look. This is a bad look for Secretary Buttigieg, who would be the leading figure on this. President Biden, I don't think he's really said much on it either, which is a little concerning. I know that like these areas of the United States were like the Democratic, solidly Democratic. They were big on unions. They were like union power, like strongholds, strongly Democratic votes back, in 2000, even as far as 2008, like going back in history. I know President Biden remembers that. I think I mentioned this last week too. He campaigns on being like a working man guy and like catering to being the most pro labor union or president in history and stuff. and he hasn't said anything. So it's going to be interesting how politically too how these regions kind of like look after especially if the government doesn't do anything about the situation in the near future. I don't see how. They need to do something though.
Honestly, I think the lack of response. I don't know. Obviously, they know about it. It's determining what that lack of response is going to mean. Because I know right now, this is off topic. Everyone said they wasn't going to do anything. The government's now slamming Ticketmaster, which is something nobody expected.
Yeah. I
don't know. After this, is that a reason for them to start cracking down on companies like Norfolk Southern, and for them to start stepping in more, intervening more, doing less of a hands-off approach when they pretty much control the market and as well are in the media every day, so they fly under public radar as well.
Well, I wouldn't say.
I don't know.
Yeah. I wouldn't say Norfolk Southern like controls the market, but they're a huge player. I see what you're saying.
Sorry, when I say control the market, like there are not new train companies popping up every day. That's what when I say control the market.
I got you. But yeah, they
to be small.
I think that
there's only a few major players like them.
But surely, the government has like enough resources to go after Ticketmaster, but also do this. And this isn't even a lot of work. They can just force pass regulation, and it's not even the president it's not just necessarily the executive department. Congress can pass a bill and mandate this too. I think so. It's like there's a lot of players that just aren't. They're kind of just ignoring it, which is definitely disappointing, I'd say. I think the EPA, though, the Environmental Protection Agency, has said that they're going to try to move forward with the case, and especially with the river, the river pollution. If that stuff gets worse, then I expect the EPA to come in and start cracking down on Norfolk Southern, and try to levy some fines and do something to not reverse the situation, obviously, but mitigate the situation.
Honestly, that's really all I had on it.
Yeah, there's not much to talk about. This is a developing story still, which is kind of sad. It's been 2 weeks. Haven't heard anything until recently.
There's still a lot more. There's still a lot of news coming out.
Yeah, so we just want to do a little update about this new thing. I mean, this really flew under our radars. I learned about this on Saturday, and at that point it had been like a week. So not great from anybody. I mean, this was barely in the news. We're going to try to stay on top of it. Expect a article on the situation, most likely. Not another podcast, probably. Definitely a couple articles, probably on the Instagram, which y'all know to follow, PB Political AL. I mean, hopefully everybody affected will end up okay. Hopefully the wildlife is all okay. And yeah, I'm just a little disappointed in the government on the lack of not just the inaction beforehand. It is what it is, but the reaction has been very poor, and I think that's something that will probably concern a lot of citizens in the future, that are especially citizens in these states. And again, politically, Ohio used to be a really big swing state. Now it's drifting away. But Pennsylvania's on the border. They're on the border of Pennsylvania, which is now a big swing state. And it's just I think it's just a bad look for the Democrats moving forward.
I have to agree.
Yeah. Not much else to talk about. We'll be back next week. New topic. Unless something crazy happens. If the UFO stuff escalates more, I'm excited to talk about that at one point. So that'll be interesting. We'll see.
It will be a big part of next podcast.
Hopefully, yeah.
I sadly know a lot about that because I've kept up with it.
There's something sad about that. I know. I'm the same way. But thank you for listening.
And it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. It's share this around. Send this to all your friends. If your friends like trains, send this podcast to them. Send this to your parents, grandparents, everybody that likes to listen to things. I don't know.
Especially if listening about trains.
Especially about trains, yeah. Follow us, PB Political. Yeah. Website, pbpolitical.com. New content Thursdays and Sundays. We're getting on that schedule. Op-eds on Mondays. So a lot of new stuff coming out there. Instagram, whatever. Follow me on Instagram. Follow Cameron on Instagram. Cameron really wants Instagram followers. This is a really long promo, so I'm going to end it. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
My name's Cameron Cummings.
And goodbye.